And what's up, guys? I'm back for the third video. As promised, I'm going to go ahead and cover controllers today. I'm not going to actually give an example about controllers. I'm just going to go ahead and explain what they are and a lot of the concepts about them. I might spend a lot of time just talking about them and not really doing too much. I am going to set it up, but that's just a heads up. It's a really important stuff to know and understand right now, so that's why I'm going to take the time to actually explain this stuff. I'm not doing it just to like waste your time or whatever. There's actually a reason why I'm just talking about it and instead of doing an example. Some things, a lot of things actually is better by example, but this thing is something that's very important to understand. Alright, so let's go ahead and start. What is a controller? First off, I would go ahead and say that a controller is something that controls a chunk of your JavaScript code. Let's say there's so many things that are moving in and out of your web page or your web application. Say for example, the user sets a date, and you need to take that date and you need to format it, or you need to make sure it's a valid date, or that they're at least 18 or something like that. There's a lot of logic going on in your web application. That logic is going to be happening within your JavaScript on the front end. And so the way that you do that is primarily through controllers. That's at least one of the most popular ways of doing that. And so a controller is controlling a chunk of JavaScript code. You can use a bunch of dependencies within these controllers to, for example, set global variables, to do database calls, and set up routing. So there's a lot that you can do with controllers, and I'm going to go ahead and explain a lot about them in this video. Next video we'll come up with some really cool examples. I don't know, I'll think of something. Right, so we have this chunk of JavaScript code, right? But we need to assign it to our app. Where do we assign that? Before we just did something like this, we just had a generic ng app. We never gave our application a name. There's nowhere we would actually assign that controller. So what we need to do is we need to give our application a name. So let's go ahead and do that. First off, I'm going to go ahead and say var app is equal to angular.module. First parameter is the name that we're going to give it, and that's Angular app. I'm just calling it. You can call it whatever you want. Second parameter is the dependencies for this application as a whole. Now, we're not working with any right now, so that's just an empty array. Okay, so let me explain this. So Angular app is the name of this application, and app is the variable that we gave it so that we can work with it in JavaScript. Now, instead of this generic ng app call here, let's go ahead and actually give it the name. So ng app is equal to whatever the name is, in this case Angular app. Perfect. Now we have this stuff in a file called app.js. I've made a new file called app.js, so you need to go ahead and actually connect that. So I'm going to go ahead and say script, and then source is equal to app.js. Alright, cool. So make sure that you have that app.js file. You could do it with an HTML, but that's very bad practice because you'll end up with a ton of JavaScript code. Anyways, so now we gave our application a name, and we can start assigning things to this application. So for example, if we want to do something like a controller, we say app.controller, and then we have all our stuff, all our code there. There's other things in Angular that you can assign to your app, like directives, and then you start writing that and whatever. However, in this video we're going to be working with controllers, so let's go ahead and give our controller get it set up. So the first parameter is the name, same as within the angular.module. So I'm going to call it Angular controller. Just not really creative or whatever, but whatever, gets the job done. And then the second parameter, it's also the dependencies. However, the very last value within this array is going to be a callback. So at the very least, your dependencies will look like this. So that way you have a callback. Now obviously, there's not too much that you can do with your there's a lot that you can do, but with your controller you want to be using dependencies, and in this case I'm going to go ahead and use one called the scope. I'm not going to focus too much about it. It's probably going to be within the next video that we work with some examples about the scope, but right now when you see $scope, so it'll look like this. when you see that, think of it as a global variable between JavaScript and the HTML document. Okay, so scope's kind of cool. You know, we've got the dependency of it, but there's this really cool thing going on here called dependency injection. And what that is basically we have these dependencies here separated by commas, and then we will pass that into our function. And so we basically have the dependency of the scope, and we're passing it into the function. All right, awesome. And so now we have an Angular controller. Now what we want to do is, and this is like one of the final things, this is the final thing to do in getting set up, is we're basically going to give our HTML document, let it know what our controller is. So this is a directive called ngController, and we're going to set it equal to the name of our controller, which is Angular controller. Perfect. So now we can actually start writing a lot of logic and stuff like that. So in this case, I'm just going to use the scope. I'm going to give it a variable called test and say hello world. Even though this is the third video, but whatever. So here, now that everything's set up, I can go ahead and call this global variable that I called test, and within the Angular expression, so it should print out hello world to the document. Let me go ahead and yep. So there's hello world. So there's a ton of things that you can do within this. This is basically going to handle all your logic, all your JavaScript logic. And yeah, what else should I go over? See, there's not really enough time for an example, so that's definitely going to be in the next video. I'm going to kind of explain what's going on here just as a recap one more time, because it's an important concept to know. And yeah, that should be about it for this video. So you'll understand how to set up a controller, and you'll understand what it is, and also the whole app itself. So yeah, if you just want to go ahead and skip on to the example in the next video, that's totally cool, but I'm just going to go ahead and go over all this. So you need to give your application a name, and so we gave it the name of Angular app, and this is the way that you do it. You give it a variable, and you do it through angular.module, and we called it app, and then we can assign things to that app. So we can assign a controller to that app. So angular.controller is what we assign to that app, and it is a controller as defined here. And this is kind of where all our logic is. We're throwing in some dependencies, and then we're also actually working with JavaScript instead of the boilerplate as it's known. All this is boilerplate where you're just setting up stuff. We need to declare an ngController to let it know what our controller is, and so that we can actually take stuff that's in here and use it here. It's very important to have this or your code will not work. And then finally, we also had to reference what our application name was so that we can use the logic that's all within this. Okay, I feel like I'm repeating myself 1,000 times. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, that's about it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video where I'm going to take the code that I have here and make some kind of example out of it. Alright, see you guys.